Hi there, it's Llarold. Today I'm going to talk about the Mythic Raszageth fight, go over how I approached and played this fight as a protection warrior, and do a full walkthrough of the fight. I had intended to stream the entire tier progression and do this type of thing with more of the fights in the raid, but I was sick with COVID during the first several weeks of Prague. I still raided, but I could barely talk. I could barely sit up straight. And once I did start feeling better, I still had a very annoying nagging cough that's still hanging around, and I didn't really think a cough-based stream seemed like a good idea, so anyway, here we are. So let's just start out with gear and talents. At the time that we killed Raz, I was 419 item level, the highest item level tank in the world. So that's definitely overkill, definitely not necessary at all. I actually unequipped my 4-piece tier set bonus because I only had normal tier pants, and so I just made some haste versatility pants with the spark gear and wore those instead of having the 4-piece. I thought that was the right call at the time. The 30 item level upgrade in that single slot, probably worth losing the tier bonus. I still think that was the right call. Now, that much gear is definitely not worth, not required to kill the boss. I was doing pulls the week before with 412 item level or so, and the week before that with 408, and I mean, it definitely made it easier to stay alive or more comfortable or whatever to have more gear, but I really didn't think it was dangerous even at the lower end of gear. The first intermission is pretty spicy, but the tank damage during the main phases of the fight is surprisingly tame. It really is just about using cooldowns effectively on the big boss hits. As long as you manage that, you can do this with a surprisingly low amount of gear. I did about 20 to 30 pulls on my monk for raid comp reasons, and my monk is only 400 item level, basically wearing like full normal gear with a handful of pieces of heroic gear thrown in, and I had zero problems living through boss damage in phase 1, even at that level. Surprisingly low tank damage for a final boss, big bursts you have to deal with, but not as fast paced as I would have expected for the final boss of a first tier. In terms of other gear, sort of the notable pieces, I'm wearing a 418 crafted weapon because there aren't any one-handed strength weapons higher than 415 out of the raid, and you can get a perfectly itemized guaranteed 418, and then hopefully get a 421 out of the Mythic Plus cache at some point. I got lucky on our last Broodkeeper kill and got the 424 shield, which felt really nice. I'm also wearing a Mythic icon that I got lucky with out of the week 1 cache, or I guess week 2 cache, and a Mythic Grief Torch as well, which is amazing for threat on the pull and for sort of key burst damage moments throughout the fight. It's not mandatory to have Grief Torch, certainly isn't mandatory for it to be like mythic item level. You have plenty of people doing it with heroic or normal item level ones, and I would have worn that, but I got this one, so why not? One important note on the Grief Torch, it does force you to channel for 2 seconds while you're using it. That means you won't be able to block or parry or use any other skills or move, or it will be canceled and you'll lose all the damage. So you want to be mindful of that. You definitely don't want to be using it while you're actively tanking unless you're already at full health or you have like some cooldowns rolling or something. If you're using it in the intermission, which you should, then you're going to want to like wait until a stun happens and then use it in that little brief window of everything being stunned so you don't get auto attacked like 11 times and die. Now let's switch over to talents and go over the talent setup I was using for the fight. This is it. I'll link this in the pinned comment. I changed this talent setup a bit throughout the fight. It started out looking a little different. I had Shockwave, I had Stormbolt, and Intimidating Shout for helping deal with sparks, but the damage requirement was high enough that we really needed the extra damage from Sidearm in the intermissions and throughout the fight, and definitely needed the damage from Uproar. Having the reduced Thunderous Roar cooldown is really important for being able to hold threat on the first and third packs of the intermission. It's about 60 seconds between those at a normal pace, and if you have a 90-second cooldown on Thunderous Roar, you're going to have a lot of trouble holding threat on that third pack. Having Shockwave was really useful early on in Prague for being able to kind of help other people cover their sparks, clear some of them out and all, but it was something that I was happy to use early on in Prague and then phase out as we got more comfortable, everyone else got more comfortable, stick to using that. Really important talent that you definitely want to be sure you have is Wrecking Throw. This is true on any difficulty. There's a ton of shields in this fight. There is on Mythic, a shield in the first intermission, and then on every difficulty, presumably even on LFR, there's a shield in the second phase of the fight. So first intermission, you have to use this if you're on the right side, the red side, to break the caster Primalist Flame Binder, something like that. Fire guy, he'll have shields that you have to burn down in 6 seconds or you all die. This is huge. You can use this on the first and third of those guys because it's about a minute between them, or 30 seconds between each of them. So there's 3. So you'll be able to use it on 2 of the 3 shields. Very huge. And then every single one of the boss's shields in phase 2. Inspiring Presence, also very important, you know, Rallying Cry, huge raid defensive cooldown, and obviously making it a little stronger and making it last a little longer. Really big deal for keeping everyone alive. A couple of other changes over here in the right tree. Disrupting Shout. The cooldown reduction is important, but being able to use this multiple times in phase 1 and in phase 2 to be able to do like an AoE destruction or whatever of all of the orbs that are scattered around throughout the fight is really helpful. I think in terms of like going back and looking at the logs of all of our hundreds of pulls, I think I was 3rd overall after the mage using Ring of Frost and the shaman using Thunderstorm or whatever. I think I was 3rd in terms of like overall amount of orbs that were disrupted purely because of this. Very important, and you can, like I said, use it twice in each of the phases, which is really helpful for just shutting down a lot of orbs. Other than that, a lot of the talents are really oriented towards like single target defensive stability and single target damage. Battering Ram is a pure single target damage talent, definitely not necessary to kill the boss, but really helped a lot with just having enough damage to get through the fight because it is pretty tight, especially near the end. Instigate, same thing, just pure single target damage. Gives you a little bit more sustained rage as well. I mean, technically so does Battering Ram, you know, more auto attacks, more rage and damage from your auto attacks in both cases. Good to have. Could have taken Sudden Death or Show of Force to have a little more intermission damage and some slight more damage in the main phases of the fight, but Battering Ram and Instigate synergize nicely and they sim better for the sort of pure single target phase 2 and phase 3 burns of the fight. And then I took Heavy Repercussions because while conventionally people would take Into the Fray and raid, you know, you're not tanking 100% of the time, so you don't have to have 100% shield block uptime. I found that there were a lot of cases where I just simply wasn't in range of enough people to get much value out of this. You might literally only be standing next to the other tank for like 40% of the fight. 30% of the fight anyway. So if you're only getting like 1 stack of Into the Fray a lot of the time, 2% haste is not better than everything that Heavy Repercussions offers. It also means that, you know, this running Heavy Repercussions makes it very easy, kind of mindless to keep shield block up and stay super safe. And it's still reasonably competitive in terms of damage if you're not getting full value out of Into the Fray. And taking Into the Fray means you would have to give up Battering Ram and take Bolster, just for that like extra safety net during the intermissions. And I didn't want to do that. I thought I was getting more damage, at least in playing around with it deeper into the fight, out of just running this sort of simpler, safer setup. You could drop Battering Ram and take like Battle Scarred Veteran, or still take Bolster, you know, just to have a little bit more defensive cooldown availability, even during Alacrity, just an extra 25,000 health or so. Probably the worst option there, though. But that is about it for talents. All right, now let's just talk about the boss. I'll start by doing like a very brief overview of the fight. It's a 3-phase fight with 2 intermissions. It's about 14 minutes and 20 seconds. You can maybe go a few seconds longer than that, but not by too much. There's no secret phases, nothing all too drastic in terms of changes from heroic outside of phase 1, really. It is a lot harder it's a lot harder, but it's not mind-blowing. It just requires a lot more coordination and the ability to remain composed for a really long fight, which is hard. The first phase still ends when she reaches 65% health, and the other 2 phases are still timed, about 3 minutes and 20 seconds for phase 2, and about 3 minutes and 45 seconds or so until she kills you in phase 3. The The first intermission is also still timed, about 90 seconds, and the second ends when you kill all the ads, which takes right around 2 minutes. You have to stop damage at the end of phase 1 for cooldown timings in the fight intermission, and you can't damage her during either intermission, so basically, you have about 7 minutes to do 65% of the boss's health. That's the main challenge of the fight from a damage perspective, and it is pretty tight unless you're running like a perfectly optimized raid comp. In terms of the hardest part of the fight, I would say that that's mainly phase 1 for everyone except the tanks, and then intermission 1 for everyone, including the tanks. It definitely is a front-loaded fight. Once you get past the initial pain, it becomes a lot easier. Let's actually start up the video now, and I'll kind of talk through things as it's playing. Okay, so our goal is to get the boss over here where everybody's standing, so we have me start out by pulling the boss over to the side. I'm popping all my cooldowns as she's, coming in. I'm trying to do everything I can to get like maximum threat on the pull because there is a taunt swap so early on. As you can see, I'm using spell block and last stand before I even pull the boss. Before we're even in combat, I'm getting my defensive cooldowns up just so that I can get all my offensive, stuff, all my damage out, grief torch, all of that, without having any sort of like disruption or the terrifying situation of not getting cooldowns up for a bite, which would be bad. Here's a spark. You want to stack with the other tank. That's pretty much every single time throughout the fight that sparks come out, you stack with the other tank, and you want to try to bite. Whenever there's a bite, you want to taunt so that they're not taking a bite and an auto attack back to back. Here's the first wind. Every time there's winds, you're going to be fighting against them trying to stay on. If you're tanking with a blood DK, they're going to want to hold threat during all of the winds. They just hold threat, use Death's Advance, and the boss never moves. That'll make positioning a lot easier for everybody. For every single one of the bites, as you can see, I use Shield Wall for that one. You want to have some sort of cooldown rolling for all of them. You can have Spell Reflection up for every single one. It's a 20-second cooldown in the bites. You're not going to be taking more than like once every 45 seconds or so. In phase 1, you can basically alternate between Spell Block and Shield Wall. Spell Block 1, Shield Wall 1, Spell Block 1, and then you can Spell Reflect and Ignore Pain every single one. So you're in pretty good shape there. Again, more sparks stacking up. For phase 1, I liked to use Disrupting Shout to get rid of a ton of sparks on the first and third spark sets. In phase 2, I actually shifted it around. I mean, we'll see when we get there. And we had one that we just had a lot of trouble with, and so the second one. And so I used it there. It meant I used one fewer throughout the fight, but it wound up making it easier for everybody, and that's kind of the point of the tool. Again, another breath, or another pushback into a breath, so you want to use your mobility cooldowns to get back to the boss, not get hit by the breath, and get ready to stack up for sparks. One of the important parts of this phase of the fight is that you're going to be stopping damage by the end anyway, so there's really no rush to do as much damage as you can. Like, obviously, you do want to at least hit that minimum checkpoint of bringing her to 65% before she finishes her 6th Wings cast. But once you've hit that point, you can pretty much just camp in defensive stance for most of the phase. Get as much threat as you can out at the start of the phase, on the pull in battle stance, and, whenever your cooldowns are up, if you really feel like popping in a battle stance and all, sure. But otherwise, pretty much camping in defensive stance for anytime you're tanking, and really most of phase 1, even if you're not tanking, it's a little trollish. I mean, I definitely found myself doing it at times, but it's a little trollish because you're just kind of pushing the boss closer to pushing into the next phase too early. This is the 5th pushback. Everybody stacks up in the middle of the platform for the spark set. Here you have taunt swap, and this is a little bit of tech I came up with myself here. I'll actually pause for it. You can see these charges are out here. I really like to have spell block up for whenever I see the charges are out because, if I'm actively tanking, because obviously a bite is coming very soon. You have a pretty long duration on spell block, 20 seconds, bite's coming in the next 13, plenty of overlap there. And these charges actually hit pretty hard, and they're all blockable. So with block up, you can see I'm going to go from like 100% to, 90. All right, 99%. Yeah, it didn't do anything. If I didn't have spell block up there, if I waited until right now to pop it, I'd probably drop down to 80%. Just makes you feel a little safer. And there we go, pushed into intermission 1. Everybody gets ready. You can throw in a couple of charges, maybe a shield slam or whatever, once she's transitioned into not taking damage, just to generate a little more rage, get ready to do the intermission, which for me, I consider to be kind of the hardest part of the fight for the tank. I use these little Shadowlands boots, I'll link them, but they're just able to do like 250,000 damage and turn most of that fall damage into damage on the first Ruiner. Bit of free damage. We get the boss on our side first. We're using Wrecking Throw, using cooldowns, blasting through that first shield, interrupting, and then switching to the Ruiner. That's the goal every single time on the right side. You break the Ruiner's shield, get it to spawn adds. You get the fire ad out. You break his shield, interrupt his cast, and the cast interruption is your job as the tank. And then once he's done, he basically just auto attacks. He doesn't really do anything else. Flamesworn Herald, that's his name. He does this big horrible roar. You interrupt it, everybody lives. Then you focus down the Ruiner, because he's doubling the damage of everything on that side of the platform. You can see we had a situation there where we kind of had to dodge a boss breath while we were still fighting a pack. You know, it's pretty normal. This overlap right here is going to be a little rough. Yeah, right here, we're going to be breaking a shield and dodging a breath. Obviously, a little touchy. You can see I kind of clipped my Grief Torch there because I had to move when I would rather just be standing still and using Grief Torch. It's okay. Still got the shield, still got the Ruiner, still got everything down, and we get over to the next platform, basically just in time to DPS the boss. You know, some of our other pulls, we were there before the boss. Felt good, gave us a little bit more damage. Not the end of the world. At this point, she basically just stands here and just sort of lets you auto attack her for 10 seconds until she puts up her shield, and you pretty much just want to go ham. Most people, you know, will want to hold their cooldowns for the shield. The one cooldown I would say don't bother on that as a prot warrior is Avatar. You just want to be getting all the value you can out of anger management, but otherwise, yeah, during this part, you're popping all your cooldowns. You're making sure to use Wrecking Throw every time on these Storm Surge shields, and you're just kind of going to town. You have the boss first, so again, spell block for the Electrified Jaws, spell reflection, ignore pain. It's not really going to hit that hard. 25% of my health. Not too bad. Here we have our Tempest Wing, and this basically replaces the Hurricane Wing from Phase 1. Otherwise, the timings are all pretty similar. You have the charges. Those root people on Mythic, so they will need to be freedomed or Tiger's Lusted or in some way break the root and still get out of range. Again, we're all stacking up, pretty similar formation. And as you can see, like I said earlier, I'm not using Disrupting Shout to break any of that first set of sparks because we got them locked down. Another little wrinkle is that the pushback wave in this phase causes you to radiate damage in like just a couple yard radius, but obviously you don't want to clip anybody, so spread out for that and head in. Then there's just this mechanic, pretty normal. The inversion mechanic, I think I got that on the kill, but I'm not sure. Basically, every 6 seconds, there we go, you'll get 3 seconds to change places. Bigwig supports it. You know, I think DBM supports it. I also made a weak aura for it, just that gives you a boxing arena gong spam until you change places. Just to make sure that you're awake and you don't, you know, sleepwalk your way into wiping the raid. Because pretty much anybody screwing that mechanic up, that's an instant wipe. Definitely had a few of those. Yeah, Disrupting Shout, really helpful there for us. We just struggled a lot with that spark set in particular, so yeah, worth doing there for us. Generally speaking, I think you could, for most groups, you're probably going to do better off just using it on the first and third and actually getting more orbs, but, you know, feel free to adjust as needed. Again, spread out for wave. It's a pretty rigid formulaic dance. Like once you get the hang of it, you know, it's a pretty scripted fight. Not that much room for improvisation. I'm definitely like still dreaming about this fight. Spreading out for Storm Surge. Always spread out for Storm Surge. And then stack right back up. They really do love stack spread as a mechanic. Big damage cooldowns, wrecking throw, all the usual stuff. The one difference here from the other Storm Surge is that when you break her Storm Surge, you know, she starts it and it's a 25-second cast. And if you break it after, I don't know, 5 seconds, she's just going to sit there and do nothing but auto attack for the next 20. She will not start the rest of her sequence until she's finished that 25 seconds, except for the third one. The third one, you basically get a couple of seconds to free DPS on her, like literally 1.5, and then she starts the third intermission or second intermission. At the start of this phase, we had the other tank rig pick up the middle ad, which you can see they're sort of in a triangle shape. The middle ad and the far ad, and I just picked up the close one. We baited the boss breath, as you saw there, and then I picked up the far ad when it came over. These ads do like basically just ranged attacks. They hit for quite a bit, but they're blockable and they're physical damage. So you just want to keep shield block up, ignore pain, so on. When they cast ball lightning, they all do it together, so that's sort of like a break in the action. Making a conscious effort not to tap any of those stormlings, because the second set we just root in the middle, and you might want to make sure you don't thunderclap any of them and slow them, or hit them with a revenge and dot them up, or a thunderous roar and dot them up or anything. You would want them to just be in there, rooted, hanging out. Now I'm just standing over here, hanging out, getting auto attacked from a million yards away. I love it. No real reason to pop any defensive cooldowns at this point. The guy does get a stacking damage buff, but all of his damage is blockable. I mean, if I needed to, I could have popped shield wall, but no need to spell block or anything like that. Again, we're just sort of putting dots up, generating rage, wasting rage maybe. All right, this is probably my biggest mistake of the entire fight. We get about 5 seconds or so of burst damage here. I pop my cooldowns. I do not go into battle stance. I pop all my cooldowns. I do 800, 900,000 damage. That would have been like 880 or 990,000 damage if I had not been in defensive stance for all of that. I realized it right about now that I had screwed up. And I'm just mad. I'm just mad for the rest of the fight that I screwed that up. I'm thinking that's probably what's going to cost us the kill. Thankfully, it didn't, but definitely felt bad. You're going to get hit with 3 Thunderous Blasts during the third phase, if it goes long enough anyway. You can spell block the first and the final one. The second one, it won't be up for, but you can have shield wall up for it. You can have shield wall up for the first and second. I did in this fight. You're going to have to, you know, need a little bit of shield slam reset luck and definitely be like kind of just spending rage aggressively, really just doing everything you can to get shield wall back off cooldown in the 45 to 55 seconds or so that you have between the first time Thunderous Blast goes on you and the second time it goes on you. In general, this phase is probably the easiest of the 3. It does have the wave pushback mechanic of phase 2. It kind of adds a new wrinkle with the tornadoes that you have to soak up, but for the most part, it's pretty close to the way it plays on Heroic. It's just obviously the timings are different and the damage values are different, and you know, everybody's kind of feeling a little like worn out because they've been in the fight for 12 and a half minutes already. Always hit those grief torches. Just make sure you're not actively tanking at the time. We'll get to that later. But yeah, now we're just kind of waiting. I mean, she's just auto-attacking. Just hanging out. She's auto-attacking, picking up tornadoes as they come in. If any of these tornadoes touch the boss, she heals for 5% of her health. That's like, I don't remember, 30 million damage or 50 billion damage or something. An unmanageable amount of health. For each of them that you pick up, you gain a stack of a debuff that does like 5,000 damage to you. So it's like not too bad per orb, but once you're at 10, that's like 50,000 damage, and that's per second. So stacks up pretty bad. You also get that same debuff if you venture out into the storm. It's called Storm's Spite, if I remember correctly. And I'm gonna go, yep, see, I get knocked out right there. I grab a couple of storms, I think, and then also get knocked out by that wave. Bit sloppy. All right here, I think I'm calling for sack from the pally, who is right now, he's dead, and I'm calling for his sack. That's okay. We got spell block and shield wall and spell reflection up. Nope, didn't have spell reflection. Was off by 2 seconds. Still though, everybody lived through that except for the people who were already dead. We sacrificed those charge set people. And at this point in the fight, I've already soaked my 3 Thunderous Blasts, so I really don't have anything left to do except stay alive, try to do as much damage as I can, and just play goalie on any orbs I see getting close to the boss. All right, this is like a critical moment here. I want to pause because I'm about to die. I know I'm about to die. I've blown through every defensive. Last Stand's on cooldown. Spell block wouldn't save me and it's on cooldown. I have enough rage right now to ignore pain again. I think I'm going to do it. Shield wall on cooldown. You know, everything's done. I'm cooked. I could try to torch, but I also want to, like, you know, maybe stay alive with a parry or whatever. Hope I can get a heal. So yeah, see, at that point I hit 7%. It's like, all right, I'll just torch. Never mind. Dead. I think, oh no, we're gonna wipe at 1%. That heal's gonna touch. Hey. Yeah, like a second or two from pain. But hey, we did it. I can live with that. All right, that's it. That's Mythic Raszageth. I like this fight. It wasn't really like a pulse-pounding thrill ride from start to finish like some more recent in-boss fights. I definitely think it's an easier fight than Sire Denathrius or the Jailer, at least from the tank's perspective, but I like this fight a lot. I was trapped in there with her for a while, but I'm glad she's dead now. I think it's thematically very cool. It probably is cooler than some of those other fights that I named. I definitely like the intermissions a lot. I think those are the most fun parts of the fight to tank, and certainly the most challenging parts of the fight to me. It's a good fight. I think it'll be a lot of fun to re-clear as we gear up and start prepping for the next tier in patch 10.1, which is probably coming out sometime this spring or summer. All right, thanks for watching. I hope this helps some people, and if not, at least, you know, hopefully it was fun. Bye.